Alrighty, welcome back everyone. We just talked about that Project Rudy that has been going through the college football world. Sounds like it hit a little bit of a snag yesterday with the SEC and the Big Ten just not being all that much in favor of it. Obviously, we will keep you updated on all of the happenings around that. Could change in a hurry, obviously, if the finances make sense, but as of right now, it seems like that's a little bit dormant. But let's get into the players and the coaches under the biggest spotlight in this upcoming weekend because there's a whole lot of them. Frankly, I could have had probably 20 people on this list. I only have 8 for you, but I thought about 10 more when I was getting ready for this morning. But let's get into this real quickly. And I think when you talk about pressure this upcoming weekend, you got to start with Ryan Day. This is a huge spot for him. This is the spot where he becomes a quote-unquote different coach. Obviously, he's not going to change on Saturday. He's not going to become someone that he wasn't before. But the reality is, he is under a ton of pressure. This is the game that he has to win. And frankly, it's a weird kind of situation around Ohio State right now because coming into the season, it was all about that game in the last weekend of the season. It was all about Michigan. It was all about beating that team that had beat you 3 years in a row and kind of railroaded you a couple of years in a row before last year. And then Michigan kind of fell off. They haven't played very good football. They're not a team that, frankly, if you look at it at least on paper, obviously a rivalry game, plenty of things can happen in that one, but on paper, Ohio State should beat Michigan by about 21 points. They should do it to Michigan what Texas did and then some. So it's definitely something that a little juice has been taken away from that one, which means a little bit more juice has been put into this one, has been put into the Penn State one. He's got to win. I want to say both of those games. Maybe one of them will do the trick for Ohio State fans, but they're a very fickle bunch. We'll see what happens up there. But the reality is, he knows that. He fully understands that this is the moment. He fully understands that this is the time when he has to prove to a lot of Ohio State faithful that he is the guy they want going forward. And frankly, I think he will prove that. I think he's a remarkable head coach, one of the best in the entire country. But the reality is, when you're at Ohio State, being one of the best is not enough. You got to be the best. You got to be competing for national championships. And as of right now, or at least over the last couple of years, he has not done that. This would be the point where he could kind of flip that switch, get a big-time win on the road, and then just kind of roll through the rest of their schedule, be the team that we expect Ohio State to be coming into the season at least. And then staying out on the West Coast and in the Big Ten, James Franklin has a huge point this upcoming weekend, kind of for the same reason that Ryan Day does. But frankly, James Franklin doesn't get nearly as far as Ryan Day does, at least in a normal year. But the reality is, pressure in big games is not a new thing for James Franklin. He's fully understood, at least for the last 5-6 years, that he has to win these games more consistently. He has to beat Ohio State. He has to beat Michigan. He has to beat USC. He has to beat Oregon. And he doesn't play Oregon or Michigan this year. So he's got to beat USC. He's got to beat Ohio State, or at least compete with Ohio State. I don't know if he has to win that game. I do know he has to win this one. If he loses this one to a coach in Lincoln Riley that is a little bit all over the place right now in his decision making, and then a team that shows you what has shown you what they are. They are a team that can get run on. They are a team that if you wear them down, you should win the game. If Penn State does really anything less, I think fans are going to be very, very upset. So obviously the Ohio State game is the biggest one on the schedule. No two ways about that. But the reality is, Penn State can't go into that Ohio State game feeling confident really at all if they don't get this one done. If they don't walk in there undefeated and feeling like they're a team that can compete with this team. And frankly, if they get in there undefeated and Texas loses to Oklahoma or Georgia the next couple of weeks, that's a 1-2 matchup possibly in Happy Valley, which would be downright special. But he's got to get through this weekend to get there first, of course. And then we got Quinn Ewers. He is coming back from an injury, it seems, in the Red River rivalry, and it's going to be fascinating to watch what this kid does because the last time he played this team, he got eaten, frankly. He just got eaten for dinner. It was not necessarily something that he came out of the gates ripping by any means. Brent Venables had him in the palm of his hand for the vast majority of the first half of this game. And then he kind of turned it on. He played really good football towards the back half of this game. Obviously, Dylan Gabriel making those plays down the stretch was the difference, but the reality is, he's coming off an injury which already adds pressure. He's playing one of the best defenses in the entire country with one of the best defensive play callers in the entire country. He has to be on point. There's no two ways about that. He can't come out a little bit shaky because OU will take a pick to the house and then this entire game will change. But I do think this will be a little bit less on Quinn Ewers in this game. I do think they're going to try to run the ball, play quick passes, not necessarily stretch him out too much. Doesn't change he has to execute at a ridiculously high level because this guy's on the other sideline. He's an absolute nightmare to deal with. And frankly, he's a nightmare to deal with, but so is the offense that he's going to have to face. Oklahoma scored 34 points in this game last year. I'd be shocked if they got to that number this year, or really anywhere close. I'd be shocked if they got anywhere past 24 in this game. So the defense has to win it for them. No two ways about that. Frankly, the defense probably going to have to win pretty much every game going forward for Oklahoma. But the reality is, this needs to be his masterpiece. This needs to be the game that he looks back on and says, if you want to know who I am as a coach, go to that game. We were entirely outmatched. We were playing a team that has the advantage in pretty much every position on the field. We were without, 5 wide receivers. We had just switched to quarterback a couple of weeks before, and my defense stonewalled one of the best offenses in the country. That's the goal of what he's trying to do. Quinn Ewers is playing some of the best football he's played in his entire life. He's incredibly hard to stop, and Wink Martindale showed you that. But the reality is, if anyone can do it, Brent Venables can, and he pretty much has to on Saturday. And then we'll talk about the guy that led him to a win in that game last year, and he now finds his way up to Oregon and plays in a huge one again this weekend. But Dillon Gabriel is in a huge spot. And frankly, when you talk about this Oregon team, there's a lot of things to like. They're so talented. They have so many things going for them. They do a really good job on defense pretty much top to bottom. They need this guy to make plays. He needs to be the guy that they brought him in for, and they brought him in to win this game, to win the Michigan game, to give them a shot to play in the national title. And this is where it starts. He has played okay football. He hasn't necessarily been the guy that you expected him to be. He's been a lot of, dumping the ball off, a lot of short routes, a lot of kind of what Bo Nix did, but doesn't necessarily have the depth doesn't have the deep shot threat that Bo Nix did have. So he's going to have to make throws in the teeth of his defense. It's going to be a nightmare to deal with, but the reality is that's why you brought him here. That's why he's here. That's why he's the starting quarterback for Oregon. And frankly, if he doesn't pull this off, there's going to be a lot of angry fans on Saturday. But on top of all of that, on top of the energy in this game, the defense that he's facing, the guy that he needs to be in this game, there's going to be about 50 NFL scouts in the crowd. And this is not a guy that's very, very high on those draft boards right now. He dices up Ohio State. He will shoot up those boards in a hurry. So a lot riding on this game. I think this is kind of the moment where a lot could change for Dillon Gabriel, not only this year, but possibly in his future. And then we got Will Howard. Exact ditto here. This is why you go get Will Howard. You knew you had this game on the horizon. You knew you had to play a little bit tougher. You knew you had to have a quarterback that was going to be a running threat. This is the moment where all of that is proven. This is the moment where he shows one way or the other if he was the big-time upgrade from Kyle McCord that I tend to believe he is, and I think a lot of people up there in Columbus think he is. But this will be the toughest environment that he has ever played in. He has played in a number of really, really good ones. Stillwater, he's played in the Big 12 Championship, he's been to Texas, he's played in a lot of really good environments. This place is going to be different in every sense of the word. There are only 60,000 people in that stadium. You would not know it by how loud that place gets. They are right on top of you. They are going to be all over this kid from the second he steps on the field to the second he steps off. That's just the reality of this game. He needs to be as level-headed as you possibly could be. And frankly, this is probably why they got him. I think the running ability is incredible, and he adds something else to that offense, and that's absolutely awesome. Kyle McCord just looked a little bit scared in these moments. Now, I think if you put him on that field on Saturday, he would not be scared of that moment because he looks as confident as he possibly could be right now. But at the end of the day, you went and got Will Howard because he started for 4 years. Because he's been in these moments, not necessarily as aggressive as this one, but he's been in these big-time moments, and he should be able to keep a level head. But he's got to on Saturday. If they don't have him playing pretty much elite football, they're going to have a really tough time moving the ball, and then their defense is just going to have to outright win it for them. And that's not the way Ohio State wants to go about business this year. I can promise you that. But moving over to the other big-time game of this weekend, LSU Ole Miss, Blake Baker. We talked about those quarterbacks being the reason that you bring them in. This is why they brought Blake Baker in. Ole Miss put up 55 on this team last year. It was an absolute drubbing. Or not a drubbing, actually. It was 55-50, which was very, very familiar for a lot of LSU fans at that point in the season. But the reality is, he's got his hands full. Lane Kiffin is going to do a ton with this offense. I think he's going to unlock a couple of things that he hasn't quite yet in the season. I think Jackson Dart is one of the most confident and comfortable quarterbacks in his system in the entire country. Blake Baker's got to do really, really good things in this game. And frankly, it's not going to be easy because the reality is you're not doing a great job on the back end. So you want to put a little bit more credence back there. But also, he's a very aggressive play caller. He very much likes to blitz the passer. He very much likes to get after this guy. So he's going to have to find them in between. And frankly, if Ole Miss doesn't have Trey Harris, that becomes a little bit easier. I'll be totally honest with you. But the reality is he's going to have to cause a lot of problems. If he cannot get to Jackson Dart on Saturday, he's going to tear you to pieces. And frankly, even if you do, he might tear you to pieces. But the reality is Blake Baker has to be huge in this game. And if he can win it for him, then I promise you that $2.5 million that they're paying him would feel like a bargain. But finally, Deion Sanders. This is a huge moment for him. I talked about it yesterday, but this is the biggest game in Deion's time at Colorado. And frankly, If he wins this weekend, next week will be the biggest moment, and so on and so on. But the reality is, this is a huge moment. This is the moment where you have the Kansas State team that came in as the favorite in the conference. You have a Colorado team that's playing really good football right now, but a lot of people still doubt. This would be the point where you plant your flag. This would be the point where you prove that we are a Big 12 contender. Frankly, I tend to believe that they're going to do that on Saturday. And frankly, I think he's one of those guys that he's done a remarkable job this year. Between him and Kurt Cignetti, you could pick your coach of the year. I have no problem one way or the other. He's done absolutely incredible things. All that being said, a lot of that momentum was around last year, and it was lost around right now last year. So you're going to have to be very careful. It's a huge game, and frankly could set you off on two very different paths this year. Dion has done an incredible job so far this year, has been one of the very best coaches in the entire country. This is the moment where he really takes that next step, where this team takes that next step, and maybe they move into a Big 12 berth and maybe a CFP berth, who knows. But the reality is, it all comes down to this weekend. If he can execute, then things get a little bit more interesting up there in Boulder. But a lot of guys, frankly, I could go on for days about the number of players, coaches, a lot of coaches that have a ton of pressure on them this upcoming weekend. Kalen DeBoer, another one, obviously, going on the road to South Carolina after a just inexplicable loss to Vanderbilt. You have to be able to execute and do it at a very high level. I hope he wears a t-shirt again. I'll be totally honest with you guys. But at the end of the day, I hope the result on the field is better, and he has a lot on his shoulders going into that game. So that'll be interesting to watch, as well as probably a million other people. But the reality is, only had to keep it to 8 there. But let's take our second break here. And when we come back, we're just going to update you on all of the games that are a little bit under the radar. Some G5 games, some Power 4 games that maybe you're just not thinking about right now, but could have an impact on how crazy this upcoming weekend is. So we'll talk about it right after this, so stick with us.